Hi, John. How are you today?
Good, thanks.
Very good. I'm so glad you can be here with us today, and just want to say thank you for serving our country as well. So the first question I have for you is, can you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about who you are?
My name's John Kinsella. I'm the eldest of 10. I left school at 14, so mainly because I was the eldest, and growing up as a young person, you know, back in the 50s and 60s, they didn't have social welfare, and what happened when Dad lost his job, no income, so Mum had to go to a Salvation Army, one of them hostels, and she had the younger girls, and me and my brother ended up in the boys' home, and my elder sisters, they ended up in a girls' home, and we were in there for about 12 months. So, I've had a pretty hectic life. But the fond memory was the family get-togethers, and unfortunately it's all eroded now, because we got cars where we can drive there, whereas before we didn't have a car. I think I was the first one to buy a car when I was in the army when I was 20 years old. But wherever we went, it was either a bus or a train, So, but the family get-togethers, they were just unbelievable. Well, it's just a token of respect. I'm an elder on campus with Western Sydney University. I do circle sentencing with the Justice Group, not only Mount Druitt Court, but Blacktown Court. Unfortunately, since I've got cancer and ended up in hospital, I've actually done one circle this year. And what happens now is because of my problems, I find it very tiring, and sometimes it's very confronting because with circle sentencing, you hear all the charges for some person, you think, what are they doing here? They should be locked up, but when you hear their story, and then they have family problems, and some of them are, on medication because of not only alcohol but depression and things like this. And then some of them don't have family, and a lot of cases that I've been on is where people don't have this family support, and you think, because I come from a big family, and my mother was one of the strongest women, and the reason I'm where I am now is because of my upbringing, But there's a lot of sad things out there with Aboriginals in the community that, Well, an Aboriginal person commits an offence, and it's up to the magistrate to decide whether they can do circle. Now, before they actually do a circle, they have to do an assessment. So anybody that, usually it's a panel of three elders, and they try and use those three elders to do the circle. So if we accept them to go through the circle, we're usually on the panel. And I've been doing circle sentencing since 2003, so I've been at it a while. But you've got to remember, in 2001, I got post-traumatic stress, and I left work and then I had a battle to get a veteran's card. I ended up with a white card, and then after 2 years, I got a gold card. Now, a gold card means a lot, especially me just getting cancer, because without a gold card, the medical bills would have been through the roof. But with the circle sentencing, it started off. We used to have a men's group, and they had a barbecue, and one of the magistrates come and they explained everything about the system. It was already trialled in Nowra, and then Mount Druitt being the biggest population in Sydney of Aboriginal people, that's where we kicked off. And then I ended up the secretary, or the president of the group. He retired, and because I was the next elder, I ended up president there. And part of your job is you do welcome to country and things like that before a meeting. We used to have justice meetings every month, and then on top of that the circles usually every Tuesday. They're pretty full on now, and but unfortunately with me being in and out of hospital all the time, I haven't been able to get back into it. The last circle I did, it was so refreshing to see these young people, because this person, had a little child, and there was a dispute with the father of the child, and they were separated. And the way these two ladies actually took this young girl aside, and she had problems with social security and things like that. And one of them actually worked for Docs, so they were going to fix up all the paperwork. And it's just amazing, you see somebody's committed an offence, and they could actually be locked up. And the way it all eventuates, because like I say, you go in, you read all the charge sheets, and you think, you shake. I worked at Cobham, and I saw a lot of bad boys out there, so you can understand that there's some people need to be locked up, and then other people fall to the wayside, and they need people. This is why the system's so good. If you've got caring elders that really care about their people, it works out well. We had a lady, she was in her 50s, and she was having a drink with a friend. He was a white person, and anyway, he tried to sexually assault her, and because she was a bit drunk, she's had a bottle of beer, and she's hit him over the head, and the bottle's broken, and it's kind of draw blood. So she was up for assault with a weapon, and anyway, by the time she got to Circle, she went to rehabilitation. She got off the alcohol, and when she was doing the Circle, she was crying. She was so shaken up about what she'd done, and the fella who she'd hit, I don't know why he didn't get a charge for attempted sexual assault, but he got off free. But he was invited to the meeting because they actually invite the victims to the circles, so they can put in there, But there was no sight of this guy, and it's just funny. Well, I guess, because of some of the things I've done in the Olympics, and I've been a coach, and, I've had respect from young people, but as an elder, it's, people call you uncle, and and it's really good. You know, it's just respect, and I've even got sister-in-laws call me uncle. You know, so it's just it's an Aboriginal thing. You know. Well, back in we lived in Redfern, and I used to go to the South Sydney Police Boys Club, and I wanted to learn boxing, but I was very shy, you know, believe it or not. And anyway, my dad, he was talking to one of my uncles, and my uncle knew the boxing coach at Leichhardt Police Boys Club. So anyway, I went over there, and I went there for 2 nights, and the second night he never showed up. So I wandered around the club, and then I saw this wrestling, and then I asked about it, and they said, "Oh, listen, come next Tuesday. We've got a wrestling competition. Bring a pair of shorts, and you can have a wrestle." So I had about 4 wrestles, and one of the wrestlers was the state champion, and, and I come second. But that's the only time he ever beat me. And within 12 months, I was Australian. I was I was state champion, and then I got beaten in the Australian championships. But then I got better, and yeah. It's pretty hectic. With the Mexico Olympics, uh, see, there was a guy that beat me in the Australian Wrestling Championships, and but he was older, and so I was fortunate to have one of the coaches that went to the Melbourne Olympics and the Rome Olympics, and he was my mentor, and he trained me that hard, and then on Sundays we used to train at Glue Police Boys Club, and we used to do circuit training, and one of the guys that went to the Mexico Olympics was a physiotherapist, and at the time of the Mexico, just before the Olympics, we all had physical tests down at the Institute of Sport at Lewisham, and Reg Marsh was the fittest athlete in the Australian Olympic team because he was a physiotherapist. But with wrestling, to be better, you've got to go from one club to another, not only because of the competition, but you're learning different things from different trainers. So I was very versatile. And I started when I was 15, and then I was 19 when I got selected to go to the Mexico Olympics, and then I got called up for national service in 1969, which is the year after, and then I was 2 years national service, so I never did any wrestling training at all, and then when I got out of the army, I started training again. I won selection to go to the Munich Olympics. So people got to realise that, without 2 years training, I come 7th in Munich. If I would have beat the Italian that I wrestled him in Mexico, he come 4th, and he was European champion at the time. If I would have beaten him, I would have come at least 3rd or 4th. And but that 2 years without training was, you got to remember these Russians back in Mexico, Munich, it was the USSR. Now in the present day Olympics, you're wrestling like 10 or 12 Russians, Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan and Ukraine and all these countries, so, but it was a good experience. Yeah, but like I said, I come from a big family, and the thing is with me, because I left school at 14, not having that education. So that was because when you're talking to a lot of people, you look at the athletes today, they're all university students and they've got high school certificates and things like this. And so it's they're the sort of people that's why I'm a bit shy, because when when I was doing when I was in the Queen Scouts, uh, so when you turn a certain age, you go to Rovers. Now I went to one Rovers meeting, and they're all people that are all professional solicitors, lawyers, and doctors, and most of them go to uni and everything, and I felt a little bit overwhelmed. So I never, but that at that time I got selected to go to Munich, and things change. But the thing is, where I held my own was when I was in one command. I joined the Army Reserves. I was in one commando company for 6 years, and in 1981 I was selected Commando of the Year. And at that time, some of the people that were in the unit, we had a barrister, Steve Finane. He represented Australia in rugby union. He actually applied to go to SAS. And I did a demolitions course. I wasn't very good at mathematics. And one of my mates was an auditor, and he showed me how to do the formulas. I ended up getting 100%, and I topped the demolitions course. It's because when you leave school at 14, people show you how to do things, and this is how I've achieved things in life. It's been hard for me because I found out when I was younger I had meningitis, and when I read up, it's to do with the brain. So I couldn't work out. I said to my sister, she's the second eldest, I said, how come all you girls can remember everything and I can't? She said, well, John, you had meningitis and it's to do with your brain. So I've put little things in place where, when I worked at Cobham, how I used to remember the kid's name was I used to associate their room number, and you put little things in place so you can remember things. If somebody says, oh, my name's Bill, unless I kind of say, g'day, Bill, and try and put it in my memory, I forget about five. I can't even remember what I had for breakfast. Jerry Donovan, and when I went to Munich, there was another box, Carney, and but the first Aboriginal to represent Australia, I think there was two. One was a basketball player, and the other one was a boxer, Francis Roberts, and he came from Armidale, because that's where my uncle, he married a Quinlan from Armidale, and I actually met Francis. But unfortunately, Francis and Joey Donovan have both passed away. Joey had a twin brother, but he went in for a heart, because he had heart problems. Just went in there, he was on the table, had a heart attack, he died on the table. He only went in for a checkup, so, yeah. Unfortunately, with Aboriginals, our longevity's not there. In the last 2 years, I've lost 5 mates, all from cancer. And they're close mates that were in the unit, not counting all the other guys that I've known from other army groups. I'm in different groups. We have a TPI association, we have the sub-branch, we have all these different organisations that cater for returned servicemen. And then you meet all these guys, and then, you actually more friends with them than the guys you serve with, yeah. Well, Mexico was a bit of an eye-opener for me because I was only 19. And anyway, you're kind of moving around the village, and I went down to the main gate, and all those Mexican people were there, and they had their little books, and they were asking for signatures, and I had to learn what sport I did. It was lucha libre. You had to learn Spanish. When I went to Germany, it was ringer. I was a ringer, but because people would ask you what sport you were, and you needed to know, what language. And in '74, I went to the Istanbul World Championships, and so all these little words you build up what your sports name is, and with Mexico it was. We were there for about 8 to 10 weeks because of the altitude, the acclimatisation, and we used to wrestle 2 5-minute bouts, so they broke it down to 3 3-minute bouts with a minute rest in between. So that was because of the altitude. But over the years, the rules for wrestling have all changed. It's probably for the better now, but I was thinking, because I've actually got a video of me wrestling the Italian, and up to the second round I was actually winning. And the thing is, because of where he come from, and he was European champion, he was just that little bit of toughness, that beat me. And then I got a Romanian. I think the Romanian come fourth. Oh, exactly, yeah. And I was actually in the Munich Olympics. You heard about the terrorists, the Palestinians? Well, the first 4 days, we had the wrestling competition. And then on the 5th day, I was in the village and I was having some refreshments with some other athletes. Next minute, bang, bang, bang. And I was in Vietnam the year before, and I knew what a AK-47 was, and I kind of froze, and I thought, no, not here. It's got to be fireworks. And anyway, went to bed. Next day, the manager comes in. He said, the Olympics is closed for the day. And he told us about the Palestinians. They took 11. There was the Israel Olympic team taken hostage. During the skirmish, there were 11 killed. The manager of the wrestling team was killed, and the other guys were mostly wrestlers. And I think there was a German, one of the security people got killed. So. It was a blight on the Olympics, and that was in September. And this is where you got the Twin Towers. But it's then I think I gave up wrestling after that, mainly because I was married and I had a daughter, and that was for 2 years. But Mexico was the friendly Olympics, But after that, I was a volunteer for the 2000 Olympics, and I was actually talking to one of the Israeli coaches, and I said, "Oh, what's your accommodation like?" He said, "Oh, we've got barbed wire around our compound. We've got security guards everywhere. It's just that every Olympics, the Jewish team are guarded, because they don't want to." Do anything like that, bad publicity. I could actually bring friends in. When I was in Mexico, I could actually bring friends into the village and show them around and things like that. But now, I had one of the young guys I used to coach at Hornsby. He got in the Olympic team, and I was asking him about me being a volunteer. I couldn't even get in into the village, you know, and being an Olympian and everything. It was the security. You had to have special security clearance. I thought it was a fantastic gesture, but would you believe that Peter Norman, he was a beautiful man. He was a Salvation Army officer, you know. He was involved with Christianity and everything. And, you know, he got ostracised. And when he died, the two American athletes actually come out and they were pallbearers for his funeral. You know, it's just, unfortunately, with the politics of things that are going on today, but he was a lovely man and he shouldn't have been treated that way, you know. You got to remember, I was only 19, and a lot of those things you think, oh, you know, it's at that time, to me, politics, being an athlete's the number one thing. Politics don't mean anything, but you can understand with a lot of the Afro-Americans that at that time the way they were treated, you know, with Muhammad Ali, you know, he actually threw his gold medal into the river for the treatment that he got when he got home, you know. Over the years, and even that Thorpe, he was a Indigenous American, you know. He won gold medals, and because he played professional baseball, he actually got paid for playing baseball. They took his medal away from him because they classed him as a professional. And when you look at the professional basketball players that are playing in the Olympics, they're worth millions of dollars, you know. So everything's changed, you know. But at least they're coming to the party and they're, you know, they've actually given the family the gold medal back. But what happened with the Americans, you know, they were virtually banned from the sport for years, you know. And then that goes back on the families, you know. Everybody's so proud that you represent your country, but as soon as something happens, you know, you look at them swimmers, the 1,500 metres Australian swimmers, you know, they got into trouble with alcohol related and their marriages and things. I mean, that went through, you know. Here's people that we look up to, and then they've all of a sudden plummeted, you know. Yeah, well, I actually met him because we've had, sometimes they have Olympic dinners and things, and I actually met him after the Olympics, and he remembered me, you know. I was in a lift with Ron Clark one time, and he was a bit of aloof, you know, because at that time he was a world champion and held records for distance and everything, and unfortunately, with the altitude and things that happen, you know. And Michael Wendon's another fella. He's a beautiful person, and I've met him a few times, and he remembers you, comes up and shakes your hand. And Kathy Freeman, you know, there's a lot of good people out there, but some people, you know, they're some people are, well, you know, like we're athletes, and you've got to respect everybody. And if you actually represent your country, you know, you've already gained that respect, and you know. It's only from what I've read, you know, but the thing is, it's what his family went through, you know. He's a guy that's won a silver medal, and I mean, I don't think he even had a glove on. He just, you know, these two Americans asked him, did he want to be part of it? And he said, just being a Dickie Die Aussie, he wanted to help him out, It's just like, I guess, him being a Christian person and probably knowing how Americans treat their, like not only, there's a lot of problems with the Afro-Americans, but people don't take into account what happens to the Indians, they're even treated worse, But at least there's a policy in America where they're actually recognised by the government, whereas we aren't. Over the we've been here for over 40,000 years, and we still not recognised properly by the government. I mean, I've been to a lot of different Western Sydney University. They had little forums about getting our recognised as being citizens, and I actually had a blue with another elder, and he was saying, "Oh, these bloody Iraqis and Afghanis, they actually get treated better than the Aboriginal people, And I thought, well, because I'm very pro-Aussie, I had a big argument we were on our way to Lighter Ridge, and we had a big blue on the way up because, the government look after Aboriginal people, We've got Closing the Gap, we've got medical, there's a lot of things that we get now. And you've got to remember back in the 50s and 60s, there was no social security. Aboriginal people virtually got nothing. When Charlie Perkins first opened up the foundation, my mother actually worked there as a welfare officer, and things got better and better. It's only because you got these people that are fighting for, but the government hasn't actually recognised us as people, You got to remember that my wife was telling me that she comes from the south coast, and Wreck Bay, it's an Aboriginal settlement, and actually if you wanted to, back in the 50s, if you wanted to go and visit somebody on the family, it had to go through special, there were special people. It's like a national park, you had to get special permission to actually go and visit people on there, and there's a lot of different communities, like Reg Saunders, after Korea, he weren't allowed to drink in the pub with his mates, and he won a captaincy in the field, and this is, but see, strong Aboriginal people, there's a lot of good role models out there, like Reg Saunders, Roy Mundine. I was actually reading, I was with the Toastmasters there for a while, and I was their cultural mentor. So I got all this information, and some of the people, famous Aboriginal people in Sydney, and they've even got a mention of me. So, yeah, I guess, I've done enough things to be mentioned. Yeah. I'll tell you what, I guess when you look at his age, because he was a bit older than me when he went to Mexico, but like I'm in my 70s now. I think he died at an early age, and you wonder if the stresses of what happened with him, if that's caused his premature death. It's very sad. There's some people very strong, and they weather problems, but then other people, I guess what you know, in society there's cancers and things that can't be helped, but you know, what highlights a lot of cancers is the stress. You know, I'm a strong person, and it's only because because my doctor, the doctor who operated on me, he said, John, you've got to be one of the strongest people. I was in ICU for 3 days. He said, John, from the time I had the operation till the time they sent me home, it was 7 days. He said, John, I could have sent you home in 5. And here's somebody at 70, well, at the time at Blacktown Hospital, they told me, I said, can you take the lung out? He said, oh, you're too old, 69. And I thought, you know, palliative support, uh, you know, my will to live was stronger than that. That's why we looked around, and we were lucky to get somebody to do that operation. I'll tell you a funny thing. When we had our last consult with him after the operation, I said, oh, doctor, I said, every time your doctors come in, I could tell your doctors because they were always smiling at me. And I said, I couldn't work out why they were smiling at me. He said, well, John, before I operated, I Googled your name. And I told them we had a very famous person, and this is why they used to always smile at me, you know. And even my wife sat there, she said, Doctor, John, before the operation, John Googled you. Well, I've still got the original letter from the government where I had to show up in York Street. There was a building where you had to go for a medical. So once you passed your medical, you were in. And there was no educational qualifications. Uh, and how the system worked was on birthdays. See, with the conscription, we didn't have enough troops. The Americans wanted us to be more involved with the Vietnam War, and we didn't have enough regular army. So this is where they got started the national service. They actually had national service uh, at the time of the Korean War, but now they don't have national service. So Afghanistan, Iraq, East Timor, they're all Army Reserve units. I was in one commando company for 6 years. That was Army Reserve. They've now done active service in East Timor, Iraq and Afghanistan, and they're Army Reservists. So they've taken over the role of national servicemen. But when I got called up, I got the letter, went for the medical, and then when I passed the medical, we had to form up in an army base down in Marrickville, and they had all these buses that drove us to Kapuka. I went to Kapuka, and with Puckapunyal, they were mainly South Australians, Victorians, and up in Singleton, they were mainly from the north. So I was fortunate to go to Kapuka. That was for 10 weeks, and it was pretty rigorous training. At the time, they gauge your fitness, and I was the fittest athlete, you know, being to the Olympics. So when we used to line up for fitness, the fittest person was on the right-hand side, and that was me. And then it used to go, because the PDIs, or physical training instructors, used to be able to assess who were the fit ones. And that's where you learn how to march, got a short haircut, you learn how to iron your clothes, and it was just, it was a good 10 weeks. And then from there, you got to choose what unit you wanted to go in. Now, I had two choices in my mind. I wanted to go to SAS or one of my wrestling coaches said, "Oh, become a physical training instructor." And when I found out that was artillery, so well, being to the Olympics, I put down physical training instructor. I got selected to go to artillery, and after I finished with Kapuka, I ended up at Holsworthy, 123 training battery for artillery. Now, after the virtually halfway through training, you had a choice of what you wanted to do in artillery, and I put down physical training instructor. So by the end of the course, there was no courses being run for physical trainer, and they were asking for volunteers to go to Vietnam. So 90% of the guys put their hand up. So I thought, oh, well, I don't want to be left out, so I put my hand up. I ended up being called up. What happened, I stayed in Holsworthy because we just got transferred, all the volunteers got transferred to what they call a holding cell in Holsworthy. And we had to wait a couple of weeks to go to Canungra. Now, Canungra at that time was a jungle training centre for any troops going to Vietnam. And that was 4 weeks of hell. And when I got up there, this is where I got the nickname Killer, because a lot of the soldiers found out there was an Olympian amongst everybody. And when they found out it was me, they used to ask me what sport I did. I said wrestling. At that time, professional wrestling was the only wrestling that was actually televised, and nobody knew what amateur wrestling was. And so I got the nickname Killer after Killer Kowalski. It was funny, on Anzac days, all my mates that went through Canungra with me and on the unit used to call me Killer. Anyway, after Canungra, we got sent back to the holding cell, and would you believe we were in the holding cell for 2 weeks? And we used to just go up to our meals, have breakfast, lunch, dinner, and we didn't have any officer telling us what to do. So we used to just hang around the hut where we slept. Anyway, the RSM spotted somebody having a smoke outside the hut, and he said, "Who are you?" And straight away, he's gone into the hut, and he's seen all those guys sitting around doing nothing, and he ended up, the next week or so, we were Dixie bashing, and we were doing all the emu bobs. So he had us working until we eventually got our orders to go to Vietnam. And from Holsworthy, we went to South Head, which was the naval base. And from there, we stayed a couple of nights, and then they transported us by bus to Mascot, and then we flew via Singapore to Vietnam. Now, when we got to Malaya or Singapore, just before we got off the plane, we were told to put civvy shirts on. So we all had polyester trousers. We all had civvy shirts on because we weren't supposed to be part of a military unit going through Singapore. And so eventually we get to Ton Sanut Airport, which was in Saigon, and there was this smell. It was probably the vegetation and the heat, and that smell never left your nostrils until you left the country. Because I remember when I went to Hong Kong for my R&R, I thought, oh, I can breathe properly. Yeah. Well, 2 years national service. So what happened? Here's what happened. I go to Vietnam. I was over there for 8 months. My unit come back to Townsville. So after Vietnam, you have a couple of weeks break, and then I kept jump on this train to go all the way up to Townsville. It took 2 days to get up there. And when I get up there, after about a week or so, they said, pack your bags, you're on the physical training instructor's course. So they sent me to Manly, and I was down there for 3 months doing the physical training instructor's course. And it was a bit of a disappointment for me because I left school at 14, and to be a physical training instructor is like being a phys ed teacher, because when you get your qualifications, you're sent to a unit to teach the different units all about fitness and things, and you had to get a certain percentage. I think I got 65%, and you had to get 70%. So ended up after the physical training instructor's course, they sent me back to Townsville, and the OC of the company, he actually chewed me out. He said, you know, you failed, and it was a bit of a disappointment, but when I got back to Townsville, I got tonsillitis, ended up in hospital, and they took the tonsils out, and I was hemorrhaging, because you know, after the operation you wake up and there's a nurse feeding you bread to soak up the blood, and I almost died, and so eventually I recovered, and but the training that I did for the 3 months in Manly, that set me up for when I got out of the army. That's the physical training that I learned. That's why I was so fit and got into the Munich Olympics. And I guess, you know, I was a failure with the PDI course, but then I changed it around and won selection to the Munich Olympics. You know, there's been a lot of things in life where you fail, but the only way you're going to be stronger is, you know, you get beaten, you've got to get up, and you've got to fight. Because in 1969, I lost the Australian Championships, and yeah, that was a disappointment. And that's one of the reasons I never applied for SAS, because I was a bit worried about the failure of, you know, these things in your mind. But then over the years I've got stronger, and, you know, I don't let anything defeat me now. I just, well, I almost died. Well, I've lived here for years, and well, I was in the Commandos when I was here. I actually joined the Commandos when I lived in Lakemba, and then we moved to Mount Druitt, and then eventually to Blacktown. While I was in Blacktown, I was coach of Blacktown Police Boys Club, and one of my mates, he was a constable there. He ran the club, and he's 4-time silver medalist in the Commonwealth Games. He went to the Seoul Olympics. Anyway, up until October last year, when I ended up in hospital, I've been involved with Mount Druitt Police Boys Club, and we were actually probably the last 5 years, we were the state. We held the record for the best wrestling club in New South Wales. But I was actually involved there just before the Olympics. We had a pretty strong club there, and then when the Olympics came, I was a volunteer. But then in 2001, that's when things went downhill. Ended up in St John of God, and yeah, the side effects of the Vietnam War, I think. And well, Mum died in 2000, and my wife got cervical cancer, and kind of with a lot of personal problems, PTSD. I ended up in St John of God for 4 weeks, and I never went back to work for the 2 years that I was trying to get on a pension, full-time pension, and it's very hard. A lot of people don't realise that with Vietnam veterans, you've got to prove all these things, and on Anzac Day, there's a few Afghan veterans actually committed suicide because they were taking too long to process their problems, and it's not a it's an uphill battle. I've travelled a bit. Been to Europe and Asia and places, and with the Sudanese, uh, uh, the Asians, and then you've got the Indians. It's just a lovely, it's cosmopolitan, and it's good to even now, like we go to the RSL club, and sometimes something that you never ever seen, like Indians playing poker machines, and then you get the Sudanese, and with the circle sentencing, they got a lot of problems with the Sudanese, and I've actually met some people. I actually did a welcome to country over at Fairfield, and it was to do with the refugee organisation, and I met a lot of Sudanese and Afghanis and people, and they come up, and because I introduced who I was and where I've been, and it was very refreshing. It's ridiculous, It's I think with Blacktown, I think that's probably why the Sudanese come because of the name Blacktown, But I'm proud to, it's just a name, It's people today. It's you got to shake your head and think, my God, what's the country coming to? To be fair dinkum, they should maybe look for an Aboriginal name and call it, maybe. Well, that's the other thing. If they want to change the name, I think they should find an Aboriginal name that suits the area. Oh, it does. You know, uh, my cousin, Reg Saunders' daughter,
Oh, yeah.
she come down and stayed with us, and we're in the shopping centre, and there was a must have been school entertainment. They had all these primary school kids, and so we saw a whole heap of Aboriginal. They had the Aboriginal colours on, and they've gone in there. So we were a bit curious, so we went in to watch, and it was a fantastic. They had these Bollywood dances. They had the Aboriginal kids doing the traditional stuff, and it was beautiful. And this is what it's all about. It's the cultural, and what they're teaching in the schools is just unbelievable. And with the Bollywood dances, you've got all the Indian-looking people, and then you've got the Aussie kids there, and some of the Aussie kids were as good as the Indians, And this is what it's all about, Like I've been to 2 Olympics, and it's what brings the world together, sport. And unfortunately, I've been to a war, but that's all politics, But this is what we've got to do, Look at that young girl. I nearly cried when she got up there about the climate. Unless so she's actually stepping up to the plate. Well, being an elder, and I like to let people know what's going on. From some of the things that I've said, I've had the last 10 months has been pretty hectic for me considering when I saw Professor Tristan Yan, he gave me 4 to 8 weeks to live without the operation. So I was just fortunate that, you know, unless you've got to be strong, a strong person. And I like to let people know that, you know, if you don't be strong and stand up for yourself, you know, and then you've got to help people. There's a lot of people, unfortunate people that, you know, especially in the judicial system. Well, when I worked at Cobham, you know, probably 80% of the Aboriginals were were locked up, you know, and they're and unfortunately, if we don't have people like me to kind of spread the word, yeah.
No worries. Thank you so much for letting us interview you today for
Oh, that's
Blacktown
okay.
Memories. Really appreciate it. And it was nice meeting you as well.
Thank you.